Hey everybody, it's Jason McLaren with the Leadership Loading Podcast. Welcome my guest today, Luke Harlan. He empowers people with the necessary insight and perspective and mindset to consistently execute at the highest level and become the best version of themselves. And we're going to talk today a little bit about having a healthy mind, healthy body, and healthy business, and some of the things that he does within his coaching mindset, and go from there. So Luke, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so let's start off with a little bit about your background and how you got into coaching.
Sure. It's so tough when you think about how you get into coaching, because it's one of those things. I would say over a 20-year career, I've always been coaching, but I labeled it different things. Whether I was managing people, well, I was mentoring teams in different industries. Even if I was kind of coaching my kids, soccer and lacrosse and those sort of things. Is that it breaks down as just I really enjoyed empowering people and teaching them something of value that I possessed and I learned myself. But pragmatically in the business world, over the last decade, prior to the last year or two that I've been doing transformational mindset coaching, I owned a digital marketing agency and did strategic marketing consulting. And what I found is that when I was engaging with teams and leaders and CEOs and owners of businesses who are leading their organizations and institutions, is that there was this great divide between the people that could take the skills, the structures, the strategies, and the tactics and go hit home runs, and then the same people who had the access to the same things were only hitting singles and doubles, to use a baseball analogy. And I found myself personally in a lot of areas of my life being the person that only hit singles and doubles, even though I realized that I had the potential to be so much greater than that. So I really investigated what was the missing piece, and the missing piece was mindset. It was kind of clarity of purpose, insight, passion, what was holding me back. And then I really dove deep into that, and I really fell in love with how our brain works and how we can actually rewire it and how we can reinstall new habits and behaviors to actually see the success that we outwardly try to achieve. And once I dialed into that formula and was able to prove it on myself, I could not share it, to use the double negative, to others. And so I started preaching from the mountaintop to my existing clients to really help them adapt and adopt the right things for their lives by starting that inside out journey. And I just fell in love with it, and it just turned into my ultimate passion. And so I sold the agency, and I downsized the consulting side of it. And just this is what I'm pursuing wholeheartedly right now, just to help anybody just bring out the greatness within them by giving them a framework and structure.
Definitely. And I think that bringing out what's inside of you is kind of the big thing on those listening, trying to move into their professional career or change careers. And so I think you talked about on your website about coaching or speaking is a privilege of helping others, which is the whole reason we have this podcast. And so how can we, even if we're not on a podcast or not, professionally doing this as a speaker, how can we get others to have their aha moment and go forward?
Well, it's one of those things that it takes the first awareness. It takes self-awareness. And if anyone who's listening to the podcast, well, good for you, because you actually know at some deep down level, you're looking for advice, direction, affirmation, validation in some area that you're trying to change. So good for you. You've already stepped into what we call the first mindset shift, which is being aware that something's wrong and you don't know what you don't know, and you're going to raise your hand. And when you raise your hand, there are wonderful people, that are there to help you. And that's a really cool thing, is that it's not a vulnerability. Being vulnerable is not a weakness. It's a strength. It's just recognizing, like anything else, that there's a skill that you don't possess. There's something that you can't, solve on your own. I always gravitate towards Einstein's statement that said, you can't solve the problems with the same level of thinking that created them. And when you're able to get out of your own way and ask for help, that's when you really start leading yourself first. And it doesn't have to be within an institution, or an organization. You don't have to be the leader, but you are a leader. You got to lead yourself first. And it's through that key of self-awareness, and just recognize that, even if you have a child or someone on the periphery, everyone's watching you. And if they're somebody who are looking to model your behavior because they like you or like what you've done, then you got to be very careful of what you're modeling and making sure it's congruent with how you want to be perceived in your identity. But that starts internally with, you got to lead yourself first. And that there's 5 distinct mindset shifts that I take my clients through. But that first one is self-awareness, and that evolves into accountability. So anyone on this podcast, it's really just you got to come to terms with, are you ready for help? Are you ready to raise your hand and start learning what you don't know about yourself so you can make a change? Because if nothing changes and you're in the same spot, and that's not why you're here.
Definitely, I like your mindset about not having to be in a leadership role to be a leader, because I think that holds a lot of people back when I talk to them about either being a guest on the show or listening to the show, and they say, well, I'm not a leader, I'm not the boss at my work, or I don't run a team. And I think a lot of people transitioning from the public sector, first responders, military, we're ingrained in that chain of command mindset that,
Sure.
oh, the leader is the guy above me in the chain of command. But everyone, even down to the squad, as we talked to in the military, somebody on that team is a leader. You might be the leader of one, but you're leading somebody.
Oh, you start with yourself, and then it's just one person. It could be, teaching a kid how to tie a shoe, or it's that, first person in the military who has to look up to the next person who might have a stronger skill set, and they emulate that and they want to be like that person. The biggest danger is when you don't realize that you're being watched or you're being evaluated, not in a judgment sense, somewhat judgmental, but more of it's like, how do I aspire to be like that person who's executing things better than I am or doing something that I'm not familiar with? And you're always being, viewed in that capacity. So when you keep yourself in check and then you try to be the best you can be and you ascend to where you set your own bar, other people are going to do that whether you're aware of it or not. So everyone's a leader because everyone's watching one another to either learn what to do or what not to do. And you'd rather be on the what to do side of the fence to create that influence and community and actually have a life of service and impact.
Definitely. Let's move on to health. You talk
Sure.
about health a lot, and you're talking about your inside out journey.
Yep.
A lot of people transitioning out of the military, sometimes they get in unhealthy mindsets, and maybe
Sure.
they take on that role of binge drinking, or they just want to play video games all day and eat Cheetos. So what do we need to do to make sure that we're driving ourselves forward and staying confident?
Well, it's realizing that there's a direct synergy between mind and body, meaning that if your mind's unhealthy, it's going to look for chemical ways to appease it, whether that's through food, alcohol, drug, or some sort of vice, which is going to temporarily release chemicals to make you feel, to dull your senses if you're in pain, or to raise your senses of feeling good, that euphoric feeling in those sort of ways. So that's just kind of a common self-medication that we try to do. But it's really to understand that your mental health can be adequately changed through your physical health, because when you exercise, when you eat clean and do some of the basics, which you know to do, but it's lacking the discipline of doing it because it's overcoming that hurdle of the immediate gratification of drinking the beer or doing this or doing that. It's going to change your mental, your physiology changes your neurology and your psychology by releasing hormones that's going to release endorphins that is going to make you feel good. So the healthier you are physically, it's already going to make you healthier mentally. You'll be alert, you'll have more energy, you'll feel better about yourself, and then you can start proactively taking care of some of the demons in your head. And that's really when you get into mindset. The thing with mindset and belief, you don't gain a new belief first, you take an action first. Your beliefs, your emotions will catch up to the actions. It's you always want to get that. You can't steer a parked car. You just got to get it moving, and then you can repaint it, put better wheels, better engine, do whatever you want to it. But you got to get moving. You can't be sedentary because there's no change. You have to have the entropy. You have to get started. So that's the biggest thing in mindset, is that realizing your physical presence of health is direct correlation to your mental health. And then it start to evaluate with what we do with our clients is just to kind of audit where these feelings are coming from. It's okay to have emotions that take you in a dark place, but when we learn to control in that self-awareness and through our journey, what we call the locus of control, where we start to be recognizing that external stimuli, that outside influence, that experience is something that, are we going to emotionally react in habitual nature subconsciously and go into a dark place? Or are we going to take that pause? That where we sit there and stimuli and response, we create that gap, and then we start learning how to intelligently respond to it, understand the emotion that it's painful, but then start to dissect where's it coming from and will it serve me? And that's just a larger mechanism of structure that we take our clients through, is to just educate them on how their brain works and where our thoughts go, so then they can start taking more control and creating greater distance, so they're not as affected by that outside stimuli that triggers real emotions and real behaviors based on ingrained experiences.
great. That leads me into my next section. So let's talk about family now. I want to break it into two sections. So let's talk about accountability and leading by example, and then we'll talk about legacy after that. But so starting off with accountability, myself, I'm a father of a 5-year-old. And so
Awesome.
I'm always leading by example, especially when I'm trying to teach her different things throughout her young life so far. But then also I mentor to my wife as well as just things I learn in my career, whether it be finance or productivity or something like that. So how can we use those kind of skills inside our family life?
I would say you use the greatest word because it's actually we have 5 mindset shifts. The second one is accountability and ownership. If you're not willing to take full ownership of your entire life and those who are in your charge, then you cannot lead them or yourself. It's like being like, you are responsible for everything in your household or everything in your business or everything in your unit. If you're the leader of it, you have to take ownership of that. When you do, it gives you choice and control. So that accountability starts with yourself. And it's also admitting fallibility, taking ownership of something. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to demonstrate that, if you mess up in front of your daughter, let's say you have a moment where she does something that's kind of innocuous, knocks over a sippy cup, or, she's 5, but you blow up and you get angry and now she's scared of you. Well, then it's okay to say, Daddy made a mistake. Then it's okay to tell your employees like, hey, I was below the line on that. When you're willing to admit vulnerability, that is a strength because you humanize yourself. It doesn't diminish your leadership capacity. It just sets an example that it's okay to make mistakes, but you got to be accountable and have ownership of them and then make the amends or the correction for it. But what you don't want to do is hide that, duck on it, and then have your words incongruent with your actions, because then you're going to lose trust and credibility, especially with kids. Kids are going to learn to have this kind of like zoned out mindset of, Daddy's angry, I'm going to go hide, or I'm going to do behavior that's manipulative so I don't get that fear or that anger, instead of embracing it through, genuine emotion as they get older and understand that it's okay. So as far as within the family, it's to make sure that you're setting the example, but also taking accountability when you fall below that line or you do something. And a lot of times I found myself with my kids, my kid did something and I yelled at him just like my dad yelled at me. So now, being self-aware, I recognize that, wow, that behavior and habit is not something that I constructed. It's something that was put into me as a child, and I'm just echoing it. So that's where you get into how do you change those sort of things. And then you can understand what happens within the household dynamic. So that's really where I see like leadership inside the family is just being more self-aware, but taking full ownership of your actions and admitting when you need to change, or just affirming that this is the way it's going to be, and then having an open dialogue and trying to extract the emotion out of it. Because emotional mismanagement really clouds and dilutes the effectiveness of your behavior and your messaging, because it's going to be preying on people's fears, as opposed to a learning environment that's open to curiosity and asking questions and getting critical feedback as opposed to criticism, if that makes sense.
Definitely. And then I've had to adjust to what I call situational leadership, especially in my professional life, but also at home with my daughter. Like you said, I'm used to, I give an order and it happens. I give an order and it happens.
Sure.
And then with her, I give an order and she questions why.
It's 2 separate worlds.
Yeah. And my wife always laughs because I do the knife hands, like point with my whole hand like a knife. Yeah. And my wife's like, that does nothing to her. So now she's actually picked up that mannerism from me, and she will knife hand me or my wife, what they call. And it's, it's hilarious.
But you said something very key, which is situational. And situational is understanding the dynamic of the people you're dealing with, or not dealing with. That sounds confrontational, but just it's really including some of the soft skills which have really gone unnoticed and unrecognized and not performed well, which is that EQ and that empathy is meeting people where they are. It's not to excuse them for the action or not hold them accountable or responsible if they're going in a direction contrary to what's been laid out for them, either at home with rules and our household rules, or in business with, the same thing that we set out as protocol. But it's to recognize what is intrinsically, why did they do it? And can you meet them halfway? They could have had a bad day. They could have just had an emotional outburst, and that, you can have them come to center and actually help them grow. as a leader and put them in the right pathway, depending if you're recognizing the situational awareness of below the surface level action or activity that they did to bring attention to themselves. When we start discussing intention, the intentionality of why someone does something, obviously, if someone's pointing a gun at you, who cares about intentionality? You're going to defend yourself. But if it's an office mistake or a kid running with scissors or something like that, how do I approach it in such a way? Because if I want them to continue to be part of the household, continue to be my daughter, continue to work for me, then it's my job as a leader to help them grow into that person that they can. And if they're having a bad day, I need to meet them there so they know they can open up and admit their vulnerability to seek help and guidance. And that's just a dynamic that's not really embraced because it's usually the carrot or the stick.
Awesome. So if I ran into you on the subway or on the sidewalk and you had 1 minute to give me some advice, what would it be?
I think I would say lead yourself first. I would say we live in an inside out world. It comes from Eastern philosophy. If you want to see the change in the world, be that within yourself and lead by example. It's a simple thing, but not a lot of people do it. So that, that's the leadership tool, is that everything that we do pragmatically on the external has to come from the internal intention, and it has to be congruent with our mindset, because at the end of the day, we have an external situation, we have a thought and a feeling behind it. It gets checked against our beliefs, what we believe to be true. We make a decision, we take an action, we get a result. Our entire identity and the course of our lives is directed by the sum of the results that or the sum of the actions that we take. So every action that we take in congruence with our big goals will achieve. Everything that is going to be mitigated as an obstacle and negate is going to also change who we are and how we're perceived. So start with yourself and everything else will follow like dominoes.
Great. And how can the listeners get a hold of you if they want to find you?
It's very easy. My name, my website is my name, which is Luke Harlan, LukeHarlan.com. I have great resources on the site. I even have a free 30-minute masterclass, which goes through the 5 critical shifts of mindset to create your best life. So it gives you a full understanding that you actually have the power to change your life by going through these shifts and having a different perspective. So it's my gift to you guys on the podcast as well. And if I can be of any resource, there's tons of ways on the site to get a hold of me, have a clarity call. No charge for any of this. I just want to see how I can benefit others and pay it forward.
All right, Luke. Well, thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. Keep doing what you're doing.
There are thousands of leadership and management podcasts to choose from. We're glad you chose the Leadership Loading Podcast, a Go Heroes production. If you'd like to support Go Heroes Inc., visit www.goheroes.org. And with that, it's time to wrap up today's show. Thank you so much for listening. We sincerely hope you liked it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your family and friends. Let's all grow together. Thanks for listening to the Leadership Loading Podcast. Leadership inspired.